Hi, Peter, can you unmute? We're ready to get started.
How's that?
That's fantastic. All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order, a special meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District, and ask Peter to do the roll call, please.
Certainly. Epstein?
Present.
Schroeder?
Present.
Perot?
Present.
Mediteranda? Absent. Dornbrook? Present.
Okay, thank you very much. Eric, any announcements?
I'd just like to remind everyone to please use the raise your hand function if you would like to speak.
Okay, great. So let me first ask whether there's any corrections to the agenda or specific items on the consent calendar that need to be discussed.
They are, am I mute? No, I'm not mute. There are a few things in the AP vouchers I'd like to have questions.
Okay, so that's in the consent for claims?
Oh, so maybe I misunderstood what you were asking for. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so item B on consent for claims, you'd like to
Yes.
separate? Okay, great. Any other changes? Okay, then we will do that. Next is open for comments from the audience. This would be for anything that's not on the agenda. So if there's any audience members who have something they want to bring to the board's attention, there would be no discussion or action, but we'd be listening attentively. And there's one comment that was submitted by mail for this.
And we do have one person as a comment here.
Okay, great.
Hello, Sam Floor-Dwyer. I just wanted to comment that I was really surprised that we're having special board meeting during an emergency, state of emergency. I understand, especially for something that isn't pertinent to the current emergency, state of emergency that we're in. I feel like it's not respectful to the community who's dealing with the impacts of this emergency. And I also don't feel like it's an appropriate allocation of staff time when the KMPUD is still in the midst of dealing with several emergencies. And I would like that to be considered in the future when you're scheduling special board meetings, because we're all being impacted. And this is a big ask of our community and of the staff to do this right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, Eric?
No, nothing for, there's a question, but it has to do with the agenda item later on.
Okay, all right. And under item 6, written comments from the public, we took all of the comments, and thank you very much, related to items 9A, B, A, and B, and we will discuss those all specifically during that section. And then there was one comment that was posted related to snow removal that we have forwarded to staff. Then we're now ready to move to the adoption of the consent calendars, item A, C, and D, the special minutes, the review of receivable shut-off, and the reauthorization for remote meetings.
Yes, Dornbrook still moved.
Okay, Dorman, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can you do the roll call, please, Peter?
Certainly. Epstein?
Aye.
Schroeder?
Aye.
Mediteranda? Absent. Perot?
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye. It passes 4-1.
Okay. We'll now move on then to that.
Just for
Yeah.
clarification, I believe it passed 4-0 with
Yeah.
one absence.
Oh, excuse me. You're right. That's
Okay.
correct.
All right. Okay, so now we'll move forward to item 7B, approval of current consent for claims. And Bertrand, you had a question.
Yes, so I have two questions actually. The first one is related to propane. So I see by page 13 and 25 Kiva propane bills, which correspond to tank deliveries. And I still have not found in the various packet any propane bill, propane bill from other suppliers. So my question is, did we got propane from different supplier, and when, and was it, basically, I'd like to have a clarification on that.
Brandy, do you want to field that one?
Sure. We were able to get deliveries, the bobtails and a tanker from a different subsidiary of Kiva during the January-February time period. But since it was still just a Kiva subsidiary, it has all been billed through the same heading that you see here on the financials. We have received in the last 2 weeks deliveries from Hunt and Sons Propane.
Yeah.
So that will be in future packets.
Okay. So basically, it was all Kiva supplying from different locations so far. Before we switch to Hunt and Son, I think, due to the fact that Kiva no longer wants to deliver propane in Kirkwood.
Correct. We just received some deliveries from High Desert Propane and Camps, but all of those are subsidiaries of Kiva to this point.
Yeah. So that was my first question. My second question is page 21. And I see page 21. Yes. I see that Eric Christensen got $1,000 referral bonuses. So I'm assuming it's for hiring. And I find it kind of a conflict of interest for the general manager to pocket referral bonuses to fill position. So I'd like to have clarification on what it is and how is that possible.
That was something that the board approved a few months back when we were struggling quite significantly to get any new staff. And that was for a accounting specialist number 2, as well as a snow removal operator.
As I said, I was never aware that, to me, this is a conflict of interest. It should not be possible for the general manager to pocket a bonus when he hires someone. So I think
I'm sorry, if you want to bring that up as an item to change how it works.
For discussion, I would definitively like to bring that back in because, as I said, I've never heard about this kind of policy anywhere. And it sounds to me that there is a conflict of interest, which is a no-no in our public entity.
Other questions on this item?
That's my 2 questions.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve the current consent for claims. Is there a second?
Yeah, Dornbrook, I'll second.
Okay, Peter, can you do the roll call?
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Minaturunda, absent. Perot,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye.
Okay, that completes item 8. So we're now ready to move on to item 9, which is our discussion on we're going to do the first 2 simultaneous at the same time. Item 9A relates to resolution 2303, which is the creation of a community facilities district number 2023-1, fire services to finance public services in and for such community facility districts. The second item is a resolution 23-04, which is to place this on a special ballot, asking for the voters to decide whether to proceed. So those are our first 2 items in the agenda. So, and then when that concludes, we'll move on to item C, which is a question of the board offering its statement of support. So I want to provide an overview of how we're going to go about doing this. And first of all, I want to mention some important dates that we are working towards. At the last board meeting on March 3rd, the board approved a resolution of intent to proceed with these two resolutions. Our purpose today is to approve or not the resolutions of formation. If those are approved, then there would be a special voter election, registered voter election, that would conclude on July 11th, 2023. And as all elections in Alpine and in our area, that would be done by mail-in ballot. If the voters approve that, then there would be a special board meeting on August 4th to certify the election. In order to meet the deadline for property taxes, the district would then need to submit no later than August 10th the specific dollar value for each parcel of special tax to be collected. Assuming that happened, then sometime during the first quarter, the district would try to conclude contract negotiations if we decide to go with a third party. And all of this we'll discuss in detail during the course of this afternoon. The counties would make funds available under their normal schedule beginning March of 2024. So those are the dates that we are working towards. Let me move on to the next slide then and talk about how we want to organize the agenda for these two topics. First of all, we're going to cover what the current state of the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department is to make sure everybody who's attending this is up to speed on what the capabilities currently are and aren't, what our costs are, how it's organized, et cetera. After that's covered primarily by Rick, we'll then look at where we think we could or should provide compared to what we're currently doing. And primarily this is focused on the level and reliability and delivery time of service. After that, we will go through the actual details of the proposal of what it would mean to provide year-round professional on-mountain fire and emergency services that are available every hour of the day, every day of the week, every week of the year. Once we conclude that, so everyone has the data, we'll then open a public comment period. And during the public comment period, we will open it up for whoever wants to speak. Because we have a large attendance today and we anticipate there'll be many people offering information, we need to limit that to 3 minutes. So each person will be offered up to 3 minutes. You don't have to take the full amount to either offer a comment, ask questions, whatever you want. There were 20 questions submitted in advance by people who very generously spent some time to write down their thoughts. And we will make sure those are covered either if they come up again during other people's questions, or otherwise we will make sure they are covered elsewhere during the public comment period. At the end of that period, then we will close the public comment, and then we'll go to the board and ask the board to make 3 decisions. The first one is whether we should form a communities facility district as described. The second is, should we submit a ballot measure for the voters to decide whether this facilities district will come into existence or not? And then does the desire of the board to publish a statement of support if there is going to be a ballot measure? I should emphasize, and we will several times, that it's not the purview of the board to decide whether there'll be this additional tax or not. That is a subject for the voters to decide. Our decision today is whether we should pass something on to the voters to decide based on the data that we have collected over really close to 5 years. So that's the agenda. Let's move to the next slide. And I want to first start out by saying a huge thank you, and I hope other people will join me in thanking the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department. First off, it's been very generously supported by the community every year. The response to the Caldor fire was a huge level of support. So I judge by the generosity of our community and many of the people on this call that we appreciate and want to thank all the efforts of the Volunteer Fire Department to date. In particular, Rick Ansell our fire chief, who's been with us since 2006, if I have my data correct. If not, Rick will correct me. And has recruited and managed over 100 volunteers over this time frame. And also Tom Harris, who's one of our volunteers and is the assistant fire chief. Next, I really want to thank all of the volunteers who have come and participated. And I want to emphasize that the fact that we're considering changes in the structure in no way reflects any lack of commitment by the community or the staff that have done huge work in representing, helping the community. Let me move on now to the details of the volunteer fire department. I'd like to call on our fire chief, Rick Ansell, to cover the details.
Thank
Rick,
you, Bob.
turn the floor to you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. First of all, Kirkwood Fire was created just after the utility district was created by LAFCO back in 1985. And since that time, it remained strictly volunteer, and we respond to all emergencies. So whether it's a wildland fire, structure fire, explosion, medical assistance, alarm calls, we're always the ones going to get the first call. For those who don't know it, Kirkwood's very unique. We're in 3 different counties, and it can be quite challenging to respond to emergency calls, being dispatched by 2 or 3 different dispatch centers. But the dedication and the loyalty of the volunteers over the years has always been committed to the Kirkwood community, and we look forward to continuing those great efforts in the future. Just a point of clarification, I actually became a member of the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department back in year 2000. And since that time, like I said, there's always been a huge strive to make the department bigger and better. But there's always been issues with staffing the volunteers to respond to calls. Consequently, volunteer response times for emergency calls have at times been not so great. But over the years, through again the dedication of the volunteers, where when I first started, we were meeting in the structure over by the Kirkwood Vehicle Maintenance Shop. They're small. If you look at the vehicle maintenance shop here in Kirkwood, the far right-hand side was the fire station, and back then it was pretty informal. We shared the structure gear was donated yellow structure gear made out of cotton. We drove a 1959 Van Pelt fire truck, as well as a 1986 engine, and things are like I said, we're pretty laid back. Some of the meetings revolved around sitting in the winter indoors with a propane heater and eating nachos on top of the heater and occasionally washing it down with some beer. I did not grow up or come from a structure like that, and so I take great pride of bringing the department up to standards for a normal fire department in this community. And in 2006, I was hired by the district as the fire chief. But the underlying issue with the fire department, and has always been, is just getting qualified volunteers to come and participate in the operations of the fire department. And a lot of great people over the years have done it. I was looking back at the records. I've trained over 100 different volunteers, but no matter, people come and go, and we're constantly trying to retain and maintain a minimum staffing level to respond to emergencies. So despite these recruiting efforts of reaching out to the community via word of mouth, working with Vail, working with other fire departments, work with local fire academies, and ultimately increasing a small stipend to volunteers to encourage them to volunteer, including recently in this last year of having dedicated free housing for volunteers and paying them an increased stipend of $200 a day. We, the fire department, still cannot provide emergency services 24/7 because of the lack of volunteers. And And in November, 13% of our calls were 13% of the calls in November were handled by me remotely. In December, 16% of those calls were handled by me and the assistant chief remotely. In January, it did drop down to 9%, and in February, 13% of the calls were handled remotely. And I take great pride in this department, but I'm very fearful of the event where it's a major structure fire or an EMS call where I'm having to come 45 minutes or further to respond. And I just don't think it's fair to the community, and therefore, through the efforts of numerous special committees and efforts on the fire department to maintain better staffing, we're at a point where we just need the community's help to get us there. Currently, even when we do respond to calls, it could be minimum staffing on the call. It could be 1 or 2 people on the call, and we fall well short below the NFPA standards for responding to emergencies. For a low hazard call, like a simple alarm call, NFPA says that you should have at least 15 people on scene. And again, we're responding with 1 or 2. And so we're doing the best we can with what we have, but the more that we have respond that are qualified, the better for everybody. KVFD also has kind of ebbed and flowed with what quality service that we could provide. When we started an EMS service through the great efforts of a former Alpine County Medical Director, Lynn Doyle, he was able to provide us with an ambulance, provide us with the training to become EMTs to use the ambulance. And that was a successful program for a few years, quite a few years. But unfortunately, due to the training requirements and the lack of available volunteers willing to take the training and become an EMT, we have unfortunately lost the ability to provide ambulance service for this community. And since 2019, essentially there's been only 2 EMTs on the department on a regular basis, and that's myself and another fellow firefighter. So again, today's request is really for the board and the community to allow us to put it to the voters to decide, what level of service they'd like to have and help us get there. And with that, I will let Bob discuss some of the funding that we have.
Thanks, Rick. Before we go to the next slide, so currently the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department is funded by 2 sources. One is a funding of slightly less than 4 cents per combustible square foot per year. And that was established many years ago. I'll ask Eric to remind me what year that was.
It was 98.
In 1998, that is on your monthly utility bill and has never been updated. So that obviously has not kept up with costs or inflation. The second source of funding is property taxes. Kirkwood receives approximately 20% of the taxes collected by the counties. We'll go into why that number hasn't been improved and can't be improved, but that works out to be about, we allocate about 1/3 of the property taxes we receive that goes into the fire department. So that's its current funding source. So as Rick mentioned, that doesn't guarantee, we can't guarantee that if you have an emergency, there'll be people on mountain to show up. So I'd like Rick to comment about what could be provided with proper funding. So why don't we move to the next slide and ask Rick to cover that.
Before we do that, maybe I'll go over what we've been doing in the last 5 years. Bob, if that'd be all right?
Yeah, right.
Flip it back to Rick. So just in the last 5 years, we adopted the Fire Service Master Plan, which identified multiple deficiencies with KVFD, including volunteer levels and staffing levels. In 2019, an ad hoc committee was formed by then President Rickert to explore all sorts of funding options. I mean, we looked under every bush and shook every money tree, I believe, and ultimately came to the conclusion that a special tax was the best way to go. At that time, the board decided to defer pursuing a special tax and instead to try and incentivize with the increased stipends that Chief Ansel talked about earlier. And then in 2021, another ad hoc committee was formed primarily due to the fact of the continued decline of volunteers and ability to respond and the gaps we're having in coverage, and to work on the special tax. So ostensibly the current efforts have been going on since 2017, but as Rick said, and since he came on as chief, he's been ringing the alarm bell. So turn that back over to Rick.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, Rick, go ahead.
Thank you. So what we're looking to do here essentially is just provide a minimum staffing level that can respond to emergencies 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Because the emergency could be like you can imagine at any time in any type of emergency. And so to ensure that personnel get there as quickly as possible, really having a paid staff here is the way to go. In years past, I believe it was in 2009, I met with the subcommittee members, 2 subcommittee members from the board, as well as 2 homeowners to discuss the response time and staffing level. So this is a problem, again, we've had for numerous years. And at that time, we came up with several different funding options to try to figure out how to do this. How do we fund the fire department? And ultimately, that's why we're here today to consider the CFD. I wish I could say all the response times to the fire department was in less than 10 minutes, but the reality is it's quite a bit more. And unfortunately, I couldn't give you the exact number of what it is, but in several years ago when I looked at it, it was an average of 15 to 18 minutes. So again, the goal here is to just try to provide the best possible service at the lowest possible price. And again, allow the community to make the decision what that looks like. And that is what I have, Bob, on this slide, unless I've forgotten something.
All right. You've covered the major points. We brought in the example of the city of San Francisco, who their goal is 90% of the time to respond within 10 minutes. Rick mentioned that we're worse than that, but we're also in the position, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, that sometimes the response time could be unknown. And can you comment on that in terms of when volunteers are available and when they aren't?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So as I mentioned before, since we do have a low staffing level, there have been many occasions where we put up an on-call calendar with the expectation and the hope that at least 2 people sign up per shift. There are 4 shifts per day to ensure that we have a minimum response of 2 individuals. Unfortunately, since last July, when we brought this to the board's attention, we haven't had that. People, these are volunteers. They have a regular life. They have families to take care of. They have jobs to do, and they just can't be here 24/7. And so when that doesn't happen, again, it defaults on myself and the assistant chief to try to cover those as best we can. And we also, we're not paid. We volunteer our time to help the community and the fire department. And at times, I can't be in Kirkwood. I live 45 minutes away, and so I cover those shifts remotely. And I take great fear that someday, for example, as a CPR in progress, where time is at essence to get an AED on site to help that person, I'm not going to be able to get there quick enough. And so, again, there's a huge need, and sometimes we'll have plenty of people here, and that's great. But I'm noticing over the last year and a half that we just don't have the personnel and the firefighters that are volunteering to show up.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Let's now move on to the next slide, and let me ask Eric to present the structure for funding. Basically a funding that would allow us to achieve what Rick has described.
Right. So with the special tax, the first step is to declare an intent, which we did at the last meeting a month ago. And today, what we were talking about is looking at the authorization to form a community facilities district, which will fund emergency fire and medical services at the levels approved by the board, which is full-time staffing. As mentioned in the notice that everyone received, that is the maximum amount for full-time staffing. It could be less than that if things change, but we have to put the maximum amount in the ballot measure, which is the full-time staffing level, 24/7 coverage, 365 days a year. Also included in there is we have to administer the CFD. We currently have an existing CFD for our wastewater and water plant, and that's administered. This would be the same as that, as well as the creation of the CFD in and of itself. So resolution 2303 lays out the name of the CFD, the boundaries of the CFD, which is the district service area ostensibly, what services we're providing, which is fire and emergency medical services. Then it talks about how much it's going to cost, the rate and method of apportionment of how that was created by our special tax consultant, amongst all those things. So resolution 2303 is in the packet. It's available on our website. It's good reading if you're insomniac, but that's the high level overview.
Okay, why don't we move on then and have Rick discuss his view on what it takes to provide full-time responsiveness.
So after numerous discussions with Eastern Alpine County, as well as Amador Fire Protection District, the former Chief White, we discussed, what it takes to be an efficient fire department at a minimum staffing level. Not a staffing level that you'd find in a very large city like Sac Metro, but within Alpine County, within Amador County. And essentially, a good minimum staffing level is 2 firefighters and a duty officer supervised by a battalion chief and or a chief. That way, you have, for example, an EMS call. You have 2 people can do patient care and 1 person to be the incident commander to have oversight on the call, to look out for safety issues, to talk on the radio, to direct other resources that may be coming in to assist. And that's a really good way to run 90% of the calls that we have. Clearly, if it's a structure fire or a large incident, a mass casualty, anything like that, that person is going to be key to get those resources and to assist the situation. So looking at a minimum of 3 staffing 24/7, working with the chiefs, you can't just hire 4 people you have to give people days off. You have to give people time for training. So whether we work a 96-hour shift on, 48 hours off shift, or a Kelly shift, which is a 1 day on, 1 day off shift, you have to have a multiple of people, essentially a staffing of 12 to maintain that 24/7. Also, looking at the cost of this, for the CFD, we had to take a look at capital expenses and kind of reach for the moon, so to speak. Once you've created a CFD, you can't ask for more money down the road. You're limited to what the special tax is capped at. So we reached for the moon when we presented numbers, rough numbers, but really good numbers that were timely and accurate with today's cost of living and everything else. for those staffing levels. Now, whether that's an engineer, a volunteer firefighter working with the duty officer who's an EMT firefighter, or if it's a captain, a paramedic, and an engineer firefighter who get paid more traditionally. But essentially trying to hit that 3-person staff to provide services for the community with the augmentation of trained volunteers. And a lot of departments will create a volunteer service as not just a feeder program for their department, but also there are a lot of people that want to help the fire departments. They want to be participants in strike teams when they become available. And so, it's not only a good stepping stone into the fire service, but it's also, if you've gone through a fire academy, it's a good way to become a certified firefighter firefighter in the state of California by volunteering for a department. So our intent is not to dissolve or get rid of trained volunteers, but actually encourage and try to use more trained volunteers to support our program and hopefully reduce the costs. Because I understand it's a very large cost for a small community, but I think there's a way to do this to provide really good service for the community in the time of need and also be mindful of the costs. So these are the numbers that you see, and I know there's a lot of community members that have had some sticker shock, but it's not the board's intent, it's not my intent to try to, create a department where people aren't being utilized to the fullest. And, we've always been financially responsible here at the district and will continue to do so. And so that is what's before you today.
Thanks, Rick. So I just want to emphasize that the actual decisions to spend money and develop things would be developed later on and would be subject to board approval and supervision. But what we have to do in creating a special district is we have to know what the ceiling is of anticipated expenses, because we can't change that after the fact. So we don't know where we'll end up, but we have a pretty good sense that it'll be at or below the ceiling level that's established here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And the other thing I want to clarify, while you've had discussions with Amador and their former chief was very, very supportive, we don't know for certain whether we would be able to enter in a contract, whether they would want to do it. We have no reason to think that they have staff already trained waiting to come in. So there's a ramp up associated with this that we can't predict yet. We just, at all times, all we know are the maximums. We don't know what the details are going to be yet.
Yes,
correct?
that's absolutely correct.
That is
Okay.
correct.
So that's the proposed level of service that we use to determine the maximum amount to tax for this effort. Let's now move on to the next slide and discuss resolution 2304 and what that does.
Sure. So again, as Bob mentioned at the open, all the board is voting on today is, one, whether to form a CFD, and two, whether to put it before the voters so they can make a decision whether or not they want to pass this tax to fund a full-time paid fire department. And that's all the board's doing. So resolution 2304 calls for a special election, which will be administered by Alpine County. And I'm glad to see Teal on here today. She is the clerk for Alpine County, and she has administered all the district elections, the board elections. And so she would administer this just as she does that, no matter which county they're in. That's an agreement between the existing counties that Alpine administers our elections. So it would be administered by the county. And the dates set forth in there are the dates that we have talked with the county clerk that work for her schedule and comply with all pertinent laws.
Okay, and Eric, some of the questions that were asked in advance might be appropriate to cover right now, and that's the main question: is why is this being done as through the voters, who are obviously significantly less than the total population here, as opposed to some other method?
Right. So in assessing a special tax, it is a vote of registered voters in the special district service area. And if you looked at the maps in the previous board packets or on the website, it shows the district service area in each of the 3 counties. So each map had to be recorded with the counties to show the specific service area for Alpine, Amador, and El Dorado counties. But special taxes require a vote of registered voters and a 2/3 affirmative vote to pass.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
any property owner in Kirkwood could register at their Kirkwood address, as long as they're not registered in multiple locations. That is the big no-no, but you're allowed to register at any of your domiciles within California.
Okay, thanks. So again, what we've covered so far is the current situation. What, as Rick said, a shoot for the moon, although maybe we won't go quite that far because there isn't much to look at in between. And the maximum dollar amount we think that might cost. I want to now turn it over to John, who's been running the temporary committee, to talk about how the tax would actually work and why we chose and why this particular method was the one that was selected. John?
Yeah, so we retained a special tax consultant. We worked with our legal attorneys, our bond counsel. We also worked with the county officials to see what is the proper method to move forward with this initiative. And the idea is to be able to have the tax applied fairly based on benefit received. And if you look at fire and medical services, the benefit received is probably better viewed as more of an insurance policy than a per incident charge. This is a service that you hope you never have to use. And in my lifetime, I've had to call for either fire or medical services twice. And in that time, I've paid many, many, many thousands of dollars in various taxes to support that facility. But I want to know it's there when I need it. When there is a health issue with a guest at my house in Kirkwood or a fire incident, I want to make sure that I've got services available that are trained and can respond with the right level of response time, which is actually minutes, to be able to mitigate the risk of either a health issue or a fire property damage issue escalating. So peak population ends up being what is the driver of, what do you need to have on staff? And if you look at what Rick put together, it's pretty minimal. It's, he really wants 3 people on the mountain at all times. So it's not extravagant with regards to head count. Now we had to figure out how do you apportion, meaning how do you distribute the cost across the various properties? And we don't know the exact usage patterns and the exact population in each residence or commercial property. So we worked with the special tax consultant to use parking spaces of developed properties as a proxy for population. And we think that's a reasonably fair way to estimate the peak population responsible for each developed property. And so for what that leads to is the apportionment of a maximum special tax. And I think Bob already emphasized that the tax is estimated at the maximum. We hope to be able to manage to a smaller number of that on an ongoing basis. Ends up being $513 per parking space. There is an annual escalator based on CPI or cost of living. For residential properties, for a single family, we assume 2 parking spaces. For a condominium, 1 parking space. And non-residential property is the number of parking spaces assigned on formation and updated on an annual basis. There's a table on the next slide that shows how those parking spaces are assigned across various properties. All right. And slide 12 is we voted in a previous board meeting for a selection of Model D. Model D was one of 4 models presented for either staffing our own full-time fire department at 2 different levels or outsourcing to a third party like Amador County Fire. And the board voted for Model D, which assumes no volunteers, but doesn't preclude volunteers that could add additional resources or perhaps reduce the overall cost. And then there's some vehicle equipment costs, some administrative expenses, and a total of 1.9 million. Community donations can continue to fund the volunteer fire department equipment, which also reduces costs. Total number of parking spaces was 3,708. And again, the special tax per parking space of 513. Slide 13. And this is just an example. We worked with the 3 counties to get the plot maps and information on each one of the properties and parcels in the 3 counties. And those were input into the process and used by the special tax consultant to make sure that we did as accurate of a job as we could in apportionment of the special tax.
John, a couple of questions related to this. So we move back to the previous slide. I just want to have you address. One is if a condo has more parking spaces than resident owners, how is that apportioned? Do you know?
I don't have that off the top of my head. Eric, do you have that?
Yes, it's apportioned 1 per condo, 2 per single family residence. It was uniform across.
So if there's more parking spaces than resident, then the question is Meadowstone has 3,346 parking spaces.
It was apportioned 1 per condo, 2 per single family residence.
Okay, all right, thank you. The other question, John, this 513 represents the maximum,
Correct.
but in fact, the way it would work is at each cycle of property taxes in August, the board would submit a number to be used. So it isn't always 513 and you keep the savings. The actual number would start out lower and then change.
Exactly. Yeah. We do the best we could to try to control the cost of the overall service, and it would be apportioned by parking space, but it could, and I'd expect it to be lower than 513.
Okay. And one other thing I think it'd be a good time to cover, Rick, do the firefighters who we hire, do they live on the mountain or they just reside here during their shift?
Sorry, Bob, was that a question for me?
Yeah.
I was fiddling with my mic here.
Okay.
The firefighters would reside on the mountain either through the existing employee housing that we have now or the quarters that we have downstairs, which might need to be slightly retrofitted, but would work.
Okay, great. Thanks. So that's the background that we've prepared for everybody to understand what's going on. We have not covered all the questions that were submitted in advance yet, but I will integrate those in as we go. So I'd now like to move to formally open the public hearing. And again, the way this will proceed is raise your hand electronically if you wish to speak, and either for a comment and question, support, whatever, or a question, then we will ask you. And unfortunately, given the number of people, we will enforce the 3-minute time limit. So we will open that up, and Eric will call on you and open it. And if there are questions there, we'll either answer them then, or if it makes sense to aggregate them, we might do that during the board discussion. We'll see how it goes. So with that, let me open the public hearing, and Eric, let me ask you to call on
Sure.
members of the audience.
Carolyn was first.
Carolyn, floor is yours.
Okay, I'm wondering, you mentioned this would cover prevention in your first slide. I'm wondering if it would cost less if you didn't cover prevention, or do you figure these people are already there and they will have time to take care of prevention, which is, I guess, what a lot of city fire departments do. I mean, we don't it doesn't seem to me like the community is asking for more prevention work, but maybe they are. I don't know. I feel like what we're looking for is emergency response, not prevention. So maybe Rick, you could address that.
Rick,
Sure. Do you want to define prevention for me, Caroline?
Code inspection, for example.
Okay.
That's what I consider prevention. You go around and you look at, whether they have a fire extinguisher or the sprinklers are working or the alarm works or any other people have code questions. I mean, it comes up all the time, especially during construction. I've been involved in that, I know. Or are you still leaving that to Alpine County Building Department?
Yeah, we deferred prevention to either Alpine or Amador County. Of course, we would assist with inspections and also pass on observations in the event we find something that is a code violation.
So I guess I would say your initial slide that said prevention is a little misleading to me, at least.
good point. We're referring to things like, taking away combustible material, et cetera. So we'll correct that. Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. Carolyn, yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go with Matt Petrie.
Hi, two questions. Wondering how costs would be allocated for Vail properties like the Quad or Red Cliffs Lodge. And I'd also be interested to know what the prior ambulance service involved and what would be anticipated for ambulance and sort of emergency medical services going forward.
So it's based on parking spaces. Obviously, Vail doesn't have parking spaces on each parcel they own, but people park on dedicated parking parcels and then go to those others. So it's allocated to the parcels with parking spaces on them. This ambulance service we had before was called Basic Life Service, a BLS ambulance.
And what does that mean practically?
I can answer that. So a BLS ambulance basically is an EMT. And we had an agreement with our EMS coordinators, Mountain Valley EMS, to be able to transport patients from Kirkwood to Rendezvous with an ALS ambulance, a paramedic, for advanced life support. This proposal is essentially providing an EMT and not an ambulance service, which could be quite expensive. Currently, Alpine County does not have an ambulance service, and they contract with East Fork on the Mesa side, and then and with Tahoe Emergency Services for anything from Pickett's Junction toward Kirkwood. In Amador County, we rely on American Legion Ambulance currently, and I know that Amador Fire Protection District is in the process of actually introducing a paramedic service within their ranks and organization, and so possibly this could be something that we could look at in the future to add to the community as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Next one, Eric.
Okay. Is Eric Rickert.
Thanks, guys. Just like to say I support the CFD and a special tax to fund our fire department. I also support the introduction of some paid firefighters, for example, engaging Amador Fire District. That seems to be a reasonable way to do that. But I don't support what's been called Model D as a default solution. I would support it as a fallback solution, but not the default solution. I think the continued strong presence of volunteer firefighters in Kirkwood is important for several reasons, which are important backup and presence, financial, and to contribute to our sense of community. I know that outsourcing, possibly to Amador Fire, and having full-time paid staff as contemplated in Model D would seem to solve our staffing problem for the foreseeable future, but unforeseen things happen. And I think it would be wise to have volunteers who are part of our community and present in our community as part of the solution. Plus, it seems apparently we'll have another year where we'll depend on volunteers and we'll have a chance to build or rebuild that volunteer staff. Second reason, financial, is fully tied to the first reason. If we can move from Model D towards Model C, the cost of providing reliable fire services in Kirkwood will come down. Less tangible, but very important, is the fire department's contribution to Kirkwood's sense of community. I'm probably particularly sensitive to this right now because I've been working on a book that chronicles stories from Kirkwood's first 50 years. And what comes through in that work is the importance of community and the ways in which that sense has diminished over the years. The events, good and bad, such as the Summer Festival and the Caldor Fire, show how important the KPFD is to the community, and we should not lose this important contribution. I recognize that rebuilding volunteers' presence in Kirkwood will require work, and it can't be the responsibility of just one or two people who have other managerial and operational duties. It will require the full participation by the resort, which should be a major source of volunteers, and when appropriate by our outsourced partners such as Amador Fire, which will need to accept and train the volunteers. KMPUD and the resort should take leadership in this recruiting effort, and if it succeeds, then the special tax would trend towards Model C. If it fails, then Model D would become the fallback solution. So I support having a CFD and a special tax, and I support paid firefighter involvement. The proposal will have my full support if there are strong expressions of willingness to recruit Kirkwood volunteers and to provide incentives in ways not yet tried. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Rick, do you want to comment on volunteers?
Yeah, Eric, thank you for I appreciate your support, but I'd really like to have your full support. As you mentioned, unforeseeable things have happened, and I too thought Model C was the right model. However, in light of the last 6 months, with all the incentives that we've given our volunteers to be here and participate, it has fallen short. And as I've mentioned, on several months, we've had numerous calls numerous days where there was nobody in Kirkwood who was available to respond. And we're relying on our mutual aid to come up here and bail Kirkwood out in an emergency. I wish that was different, but it takes a lot to be a volunteer. It's not just a body in the door. It's somebody who has to go through numerous hours of training to be proficient enough to handle an emergency. And I don't think it's fair to put onto the volunteer staff now to expect them to deal with a structure fire when they're not even capable or eligible to go into a burning building with an air pack on, let alone if it's an emergency where it's a medical aid and you've got 2 volunteers dealing with a life-threatening event, and they've had some or little training, and it puts a lot of stress on them. And I've actually lost volunteers over the years who felt like this job was too stressful because of the minimum staffing that we've had. So, but I do appreciate your support, and I'm looking to do whatever we can to reduce the cost, but I think we really need to have 2 full-time people, paid people here to provide the best possible service we can to the community.
Okay, thanks. Next question then, Eric.
And Floor.
Hello, Suzanne Fleur. I appreciate all the time and effort that has gone into this proposal, but I think you guys really missed the mark with this one. We have a small community, and I myself was a volunteer firefighter for 6 years, and have already reached out to Rick several weeks ago to indicate that I'm intending to rejoin our volunteer fire department. I agree with Eric Rickert that the volunteer fire department was a critical part of our community, and I would like to see it be that again. And I think that it can. I know that there's challenges that come with that, but asking our community to fund all of the services, emergency services in our valley, whether they're on 88 or in the valley, at the resort, in someone's condo, rental condo, it's not fair to our community to put that burden on them. I haven't seen recruitment for the volunteer fire department. There has not been any alarm bells of, hey, we are drowning over here. We really need people to come join our department. And here's what we're offering you. A lot of people are no longer required to live on mountain that were working up here. That used to be a critical part of our fire department. And that has also trickled down to other issues in Valley, especially during the winter months. I would also like to see a better assessment of what services we need to provide in Valley and what services in Valley should be paying for. I don't think me as a homeowner should be responsible for paying for through traffic on 88. The county should be paying for that. And I also want to make sure that we're following through on every call, that we're getting fully paid out for them, because I know in the past that wasn't always the case. And there could be lost money in that process. And I know that that process was not always followed through. I think that there's lots of other venues and ways that we can address this. And I don't think that this is it. I don't know that creating a CFD to some extent in the future isn't the right option, but asking for the keys to the bank and saying, we're just going to do our best to do what's right for the community, I'm not okay with that.
Okay, thank you. Rick, can you comment on the through traffic and the ability to recover expenses from an incident?
Yes, we in years past have sought many ways to try to reimburse the department for services. And one of the ways was through Whitman EMS billing for medical calls, which pretty much went away when we lost our ambulance. And then the other mechanism was through a company called Fire Recovery USA. However, due to the challenges of seeking all the information that you need on scene, was very difficult at times. When we've initially started that program, we were able to call and get the information from the authorities that handled the call. But since that time, it's been a challenge. But we just recently reinstated our contract agreement with Fire Recovery, and we actively try to get reimbursement for the 30% of the calls that we have that are outside the Kirkwood community. But it's certainly a challenge. So, and as for the other question about volunteering and soliciting volunteers, we've tried every possible way to get volunteers in the Valley. You may not see a flyer up at the general store, which produce little or no return. Our best way of getting volunteers is through the word of mouth. And so the volunteers I have in the department now either work for Vail, they work for a different property service company. We either rendezvous or meet with them on certain calls. And it has produced a couple of homeowners who can come up on the weekend once in a while to volunteer. But the fundamental problem with relying on volunteers is the quality and the level of training that they have. If I don't have a volunteer that can come and commit themselves for 6 months to understand us, to safely go on a call, it's like I said, it's a revolving door. I've had over 100 different volunteers come through, and those who've had really good EMS background, firefighting experience, we can get them into the system much quicker. Those who start and work for a while and then leave, I'm always here. The door's always open. Our meetings are on Thursday nights at 4:30. Anybody's welcome to come and participate, but I can't rely on maybe, I think someone's going to come. They show up for 2 weeks. They don't come back. And then never mind the expense of getting them into $6,000 worth of turnouts every time I get a new volunteer that's different shapes and sizes. I think my uniform inventory can only be so big. And so again, that's why having a paid staff that I can rely on and know that they're going to respond is, I think, something the community deserves.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Let's go to the next question.
Howard?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say, I'm not real happy with the process here. Eric Rickert brought up some alternate plans, and there's been nothing presented about alternatives here. And 3 minutes with all the things that, for one person to be limited to 3 minutes is kind of ridiculous, frankly. and you're trying to rush this thing through because you're looking forward to getting something resolved this year. And you're talking about going from 0 or maybe 1 full-time person to 12. So, I mean, you're asking an awful lot of this community. And I would like to remind the board that the way you're proposing to do this is going to be very, very unfair to some people. We have some people, particularly in KMA, who've been living here a long time and have very modest homes. And they don't have garages that can hold 3 or 4 vehicles. And we don't even have any dedicated parking for most of us. The people that have older homes don't even have a single dedicated parking space. And so you're going to ask them to pay as much as somebody that has a, 4,000 square foot home somewhere else, and possibly pay half as much as somebody with a condo, which just happens to be twice as many square feet. So I think the whole formula for funding this just seems eminently unfair. And I don't understand how this can be brought this way. And I realize it's not exactly going to be railroaded through. There's going to have to be votes, but a lot of people don't get to vote here. So I'd like to thank Ann Floor and Eric for their comments. I thought they were very good. But I have to say that the way this is being proposed, and I understand that Vail Resorts is pretty much opposed to the way this is being proposed. So I'm just kind of dismayed by this whole thing.
Okay, we'll move on to the next comment then.
Sandy.
This is Sandy Goldberg. Thank you for your presentation and all the work that you've done over the last 3 or 4 years. I think what I'd like to share is that we are all at high risk of not supporting this option. Currently, we don't have a valid fire department that could protect our homes if we had a fire, nor do we have anyone that could come help us if, God forbid, someone had a heart attack or other medical emergency. I understand some of you might feel this is rushed. I understand you may not be informed, but I feel like the board has been working on our behalf, and they're trying to fix a big problem for our community. And I see this as the only solution. I mean, sure, if you can supplement with some volunteers, I highly encourage that. I think volunteers are very valuable, but in every place, volunteerism has diminished. People are busy and they have more in their lives than volunteering. And this is a difficult job to volunteer for. So I don't cherish the idea of my property taxes going up, but I see it like John Schroeder said, this is insurance that we can safely have a place in Kirkwood, that we can safely live in Kirkwood, hike, ski, kayak, whatever you like to do, and take a risk. If you have an injury, someone will be there if you need them. We've called on the medics 3 times since we've been homeowners, 30 years. One of the times was with the ambulance that took my son, who had high altitude pulmonary edema, and he almost died. But the PUD and the volunteer fire department went over to my house. My son was there by himself, and they put him in the ambulance and they took him to the top of Carson Pass and met the other ambulance from the other side, and he survived. So I support this, and I encourage everyone else to think twice before condemning it, because I don't see that we have any other options Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Okay, let's see, Jessica.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jessica Cole. We live here full-time, family of 4 with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old son. I guess I have a couple of comments. One is related to Ann Flores with the asking of volunteers. Not directly to Rick, but I have expressed interest to a variety of other volunteer firefighters within the past year and a half.
I'm sorry, Jessica, I think you've cut out.
This
Can
is
you
the
hear us?
first meeting. This is the first meeting I'm actually hearing that volunteers are needed. The second, last year, you asked for us to clear our own fire hydrants, which we have been trying to do, but in the course of, the amount of snow that we've had this year, it's become buried. I've tried on 3 different occasions to dig it out myself, wrote an email to the PUD because I didn't know who else to write to, asking if someone could come out and mark the location of the fire hydrant so that I knew where I was trying to dig. This was about 2 weeks ago. I've since gotten no response on that. So you have people in this community that want to help the firefighters and the fire department, but I don't see that being reciprocated. I've also expressed interest to other volunteers about joining the fire department as a volunteer, but have been told that unless you can work night shifts, that you're not wanted. That for me, I still have to wake up my 3-year-old twice a night in order to take him to the bathroom so he doesn't pee his bed. So an overnight shift isn't possible for me. But during the day, I'm currently unemployed. So I feel like I could be quite an asset that has been turned away. And then my big question is that you had said that 20% of property taxes, I assume, that are being allocated to the fire department in Amador County are being redirected here. What is happening to the other 80% of my property taxes that are going towards the fire departments? Where are they going? Are they going towards Amador County that is not supporting Kirkwood? That's a funding source that I feel like is not been clarified.
Jessica, let me clarify that for you now. Since so the way property taxes work, the counties collect them, and then approximately 20% of it is transferred to the PUD for allocation. So the other 80% stays with the county to run county services, their schools, their administrative, their roads, etc. But the counties provide very little direct service to Kirkwood. Instead, they allocate 20% of the property taxes. Of that 20%, and it's about $850,000 a year, is the total property taxes we receive from the 3 counties. Approximately, it varies obviously with property values. And we spend about 1/3 of that amount with the fire department, in addition to the money that's collected on the fee on your bill. So that's how it's structured. So thank you for your question, comments. Eric, go to the next.
Oh, Bob, let me just jump in there and
oh yeah, sure.
Just to answer Jessica's first part of her question. I apologize if one of my volunteers told you that we didn't need you, and that's certainly not the case. And it's true, we need help at nights, after hours primarily, because myself and others are here working during the day. But no, again, our meetings are Thursdays at 4:30. If you have time or are interested, you're welcome to attend. We also have a special subcommittee for the Kirkwood Summer Festival, and we always need help with that. So don't let me turn you away that way, or don't let what maybe someone said turn you away from our need for help. And the other thing is, yeah, you did I did hear your message about the hydrant. I apologize. That is my fault. I haven't gotten back to you. Been pretty busy. But we can try to at least try to mark the hydrant that's near your home. So hopefully I've answered your questions.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, Eric, next question.
It's either Christian or Beth. I'm not sure because they have both their names, so I'll just let them go.
Okay, Christian or Beth, you're muted, so please unmute, and the floor is yours.
Maybe I'll come back.
No, I think they just came in.
Yeah, I just came. Sorry. So
Hi,
first,
Christian. Okay, go ahead.
I like to commend the board for addressing a very difficult problem. And I have to say, I feel for Rick Ansel facing an impossible situation. However, a full-time fire department is a very expensive proposition to do. It's a dream to have, but I don't think we can afford this dream. The labor cost alone of 1.9 million has a present value of over 26 million. If you add to this the capital expenses, we're going to be way above $30 million, which would be the second most expensive project that KMPUD has ever done. Only the power line would be more expensive. So we haven't seen a summary of revenue and expenses for this project. We haven't seen a capital budget. And I think it would show the difficulty of implementing something like this in a community the size of Kirkwood. The other data that is missing, I think, the analysis of the historical calls. It's between 100 and 150 calls per year. Many of these are non-urgent, and many of these are probably driven by Vail Resort. So Vail is the crowd coming to the valley. Vail has more employees in the valley full-time than KMPUD, than anybody else, essentially. And I think developing a solution, defining a solution that doesn't include Vail as a party is going to be impossible for the community to afford. So my recommendation would be to table this thing, get together with Vail, define some joint objective and use some of their personnel to achieve some of the things we would like to see with a fire department.
Okay, thanks. I believe Eric can respond to some of your questions. Eric?
Sure. So I'm going to respond, Christian, to your note in the chat first. You said that there's nothing included for capital. Let me find it here. There actually is. It's right here. So there is no additional capital cost, annual vehicles, equipment. This is the capital cost that we have projected over. I think we used 35 years, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what we took it out to. So the capital is actually included in the $1.9 million as well. I'm trying to remember, Bob, what was his other question?
Well, the other thing we should comment on that is that we do have considerable funds still in the volunteer fire, in the C3 from the generous donations in the community. So we anticipate using those for capital purposes as well. I think the other question that has come up in many cases is Vail has full-time employees. What is the way of coordinating with them to have volunteers be more secure in that? Have we tried that in the past? What do we think about that approach?
Rick can speak to the past. We'd love to have them volunteer. It just simply hasn't materialized. So if they wanted to volunteer and become volunteers and go through the training, that'd be wonderful. We'd love it.
Yeah, Rick, so maybe you can comment on the past experience, although past is not predictions of the future.
Yeah, I mean, we work closely with some of the Vail EMTs, first ski patrollers, and in the old days, there was a big divide between Kirkwood Resort EMTs and Kirkwood Fire. I think over the years we've patched up that relationship, and we welcome any EMTs that like to be here. However, the demographics of the valley has certainly changed over the years. I don't know the answer to this question, but I wonder how many of those ski patrollers who are EMTs actually live in the Kirkwood Valley. Like me, it's been very challenging to get people who are able, willing, and interested in volunteering after working a hard day on the ski resort or at the ski resort for Vail or anywhere else to come and participate in trainings, as well as let alone get up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a smoke alarm at one of our commercial buildings. But again, it's things have changed in Kirkwood. We no longer have a core, sustainable, reliable group of people year round. We seem to increase the numbers in the winter, but in the summer and the elbow seasons, it can be kind of a ghost town. And those that are typically really good, active people, you know, they're somewhere else working. So, but I'd love to have them on the department if they were interested.
Okay, thanks, Rick. So let's move on to the, we have 2 more.
Yep. And I'm sure we'll have more come in, but they trickle in. So right now,
Yep.
Greg McManus.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Greg McManus. I actually was president of PUD for a number of years, volunteer fireman, EMT, and lived in Kirkwood. I really have to agree with Christian and with Howard. I think this is something that, especially because the funding mechanism is driven by registered voters, I think that's not going to really build community support. I think you really need to go back and look at what other mechanism you can use to actually gauge the community and make the community feel much more supportive of of this increase in taxes. And as we all know, and I've seen, the once CFD comes in, it just continues to go up in cost. Eric, I actually started the assessment for the wood decks and stuff back in 1990. So that was an additional funding, along with bullying the counties to give us more money. I think that some of the things that I haven't heard is how many calls, Christian alluded to it a little, how many calls we actually have a year that are in Valley calls that are not related to helicopter LZ or anything else. I know Highway 88 calls used to be the majority of what the fire department did. And I started in the fire department in 1987. And then the other thing I'm not seeing is, what is the ISO change going to be for our insurance rates if we have a full-time fire department, staff fire department, as opposed to what our current ISO rating is? And then if we lose the fire department completely, what the ISO rating is going to go to from a fire insurance standpoint. And the last thing is, I lived here for many, many years. And the response from either Amador or Lake Valley used to be really pretty decent in the summer. Obviously, the winter's a little more protracted. But as we saw this year, if there's a medical emergency in the valley in the winter with the roads closed, we need to be self-sufficient. I've got a defibrillator and trained with it, and we just need everyone to kind of, we're all in this together. We've got to be resourceful and resilient ourselves. That's it.
Okay, Greg, thank you. Rick, do you have any information on provide on how many calls? I don't know if we have that.
I do.
Okay.
Historically, the last 5 years, we've averaged about 69 calls within the Kirkwood Valley, 30 with the balance, 30% essentially outside the valley. And just so you know, Alpine County, 74% of the calls last year. Amador County had 25%. El Dorado had 1%. And that's looking like an average for the last 5 years. Last year we had 80 calls, with the peak being 135 in 2017. We'll probably go over that 135. We've had a tremendous amount of calls just at the beginning of this year. So those are our stats. Yeah, our numbers are low, but as Greg mentioned, you know, I've been on Carson Pass in an ambulance with the CPR, hoping and praying that the pass opened up because helicopters couldn't fly, and we had the ways and the means to help that person with some qualified people. If I don't have qualified trained people, and or if it's just one person, the outcome might be different. So he's right. We definitely need to take care of our own and do the best we can.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
We have your neighbor, Bob Williams.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So I guess this will be my 23rd year at Kirkwood. I'm also on the board of the Juniper Ridge Homeowner Association. And I think it's going to be difficult here to find a Solomonic solution to this that's equitable, achieves balance, and gets what we need. And I think the one thing that's clear here is that Kirkwood's going to become a more expensive place for all of us. Propane plowing this winter has just shown us a difficulty for hiring and finding employees, expense for employees to live here. And the big elephant in the room is the $9 billion market cap company that, to some extent, I would call it a free ride, because I think they pay at least $1 million under this tax proposal compared to the homeowners, is that they pay their fair share, because we spent $55 million of tax burden on us for building a power plant. And while they're our biggest consumer, that's far more than they spent to even buy the resort. And that my real comment here is not for immediate cost and burden sharing, but that going forward, Vail needs to step it up a little bit, because our community, relative to the number of people they have on mountain coming here, driving here, utilizing services for which we are paying. I don't know the numbers. It'd be interesting to look at that, but it feels that there is an imbalance here in terms of what we're being asked to carry versus what they are carrying. If you have other numbers to convince me otherwise, I'd love to hear them now or some other time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Okay, ready for next?
Yep, we have Matt.
Okay.
Thanks. I'll address Bob's comments in my statement here. So thank you for the time. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Definitely the safety and protection of our guests and employees, as well as the community, are a huge priority for us. And addressing the emergency response needs. I've shared in written comments and during the last meeting that, yeah, there's challenges and we want to be a part of the solution. However, I do have serious questions and concerns with this proposal. We make ongoing investments in our employees' training and safety. Our ski patrollers are almost all EMT certified in order to provide a higher level of responsiveness and care. If an unfortunate event is needed. Some of those patrollers, to address one of the earlier questions, do live in the valley. And then in the winter, we have several that stay overnight that we put up for snow safety. So they're used to staying overnight to be here to serve our guests and get the mountain going. Many are also available for summer work and do trail work. During the winter season, to Bob's comment, and just so everyone else is aware, we do subsidize the Barton Clinic that is contracted to be open, every scheduled day of our season. That is a substantial subsidy that we provide to make sure that Barton is on site. We've actually prioritized Kirkwood over having a clinic at Heavenly. That is staffed with doctors and nurses, so that actually provides a higher level of care for the entire community than the fire district does at that time, or our patrollers. So that's operating, basically all the hours that the guests that are using our parking spots that are flooding the valley, that they're here, our clinic is available to serve them. So I do feel like we are doing when we increase the population in the valley, I feel very strongly that we are serving all of those and the rest of the community for that matter, because the clinic is open to anyone walking in, whether they're skiing or not. We've been ready to partner with the PUD. I think, as I mentioned at the March 3rd meeting, the other issue I have, I'll talk about kind of two issues. One is recruiting.
Matt, to be fair to everybody, you have a limited time left.
Bob, I appreciate that. I also, given that
let me interject here. I think it's totally inappropriate. I mean, Val is a major contributor to this thing. You need to give it more time than 3 minutes. I disagree on fairness. It is potentially going to be liable with your proposal to $1 million. So I object to that. I think we should give him the time to express himself.
Okay, please proceed, Matt.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Bertrand and Bob. The number of parking spaces is a huge concern with the methodology. It's not proportional or representative of the calls and the emergency demands in the community. As Rick just pointed out, the number of calls, I would venture to say that very few, if any of those, are actually for our day guests that use those parking spaces. A whole 30% of them are out on 88, and that includes all the months that we don't operate. So using parking spaces is a flawed and unreasonable methodology, as I pointed out in the written comments. And additionally, and I think Eric and I are going to work this out, we need to go through the parking reports. Some of them are outdated from 2007 and 2015. And Eric, your response, and I appreciate that it's complicated. So I look forward to sitting down, within the next week or so, to kind of walk through that. I'm happy to collaborate. I think we have the ability, back to the recruiting piece. We have the ability to reach out, and I've shared this, but as Ann and Jessica and others have pointed out, I haven't seen any recruiting, and we are the biggest source, especially with folks that are already EMTs, and upwards of close to 200 beds in Valley. We're the biggest source of potential recruiting. I'd be willing to open up Red Cliffs, have an informational session. I've offered this up to get word out to our employees. Furthermore, we can provide incentives and partner with the district on beyond just the $100. We can provide housing that might be a little bit more amenable, especially in the off season, to folks picking up shifts. So even if they don't live at Kirkwood, again, our patrollers are used to staying over, and what's certainly have already expressed interest as I've started talking with them once I found out about the dire straits of volunteers and this proposal. So there's numerous opportunities for win-wins. It was mentioned in the letter that you tried it, Bob, in that letter that you worked with Vail, and over the last 4 years, I can't recall somebody reaching out to us for help with this. So I'd like to understand what that was. But regardless, I think there's many opportunities, and it's premature to jump to this kind of most expensive solution for the community and everyone. And we need to look at different options, not only for is parking the right and a reasonable approach, but have we really exhausted the opportunities to get volunteers and all the folks that will want to lean in and help. So I'll stop there, but I obviously concerns with the lack of awareness up in till now with the community and the approach here.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. So there's several questions that were raised there, and let me just say that independent of any voting happening today, we need, Rick is calling out for volunteers. So if you are prepared, if Vail is prepared to help with that effort, seeing that would be greatly appreciated regardless of any other decisions that happened today. There was a question about other things that we have tried leading up to this, and that was summarized in the letter we sent to the community. But Eric, do you want to answer that question of what else we've tried?
And it may have been with Matt's predecessor, may have been with Tom Fortune. I recall that Eric and I met with Matt when he was president, but his presidency stretched both. So I could be, I'm not sure which it was, but we did ask if Vail would be willing to add on a voluntary per ticket price to help augment the fire budget. When we first started looking at this, the answer was a hard no. We also asked about increasing the civic fee through KCA. The answer was a hard no. And this has been talked about for 5 years. I know Matt's only been here a few of those 5, but it has been talked about. It's been talked about at multiple board meetings and committee meetings on which multiple Vail employees sit as committee members as well. So that to those specific ones.
And what about contact with the counties and the 20%?
Again, Eric and I sat down with the counties to gauge interest of renegotiating the 20%. There was no interest. We went down the path of trying to contract with Eastern Alpine. I know Terry Woodrow was very instrumental in helping us with that, meeting with the Alpine County CAO and then Chief Hughes, who has since retired. We didn't make any progress with that as well. So, and there were more things that we looked at beyond that, but I think those are the ones that were just mentioned. So.
Okay, there are some questions that were submitted.
Yeah, can I go through
Q&A?
those?
Yes, I was going to suggest you do those.
I'll just
now.
go through the ones. So let's go through Regina Everhart's. Okay, is the vision that these firefighter EMTs will live on mountain? Where, if not, how does it solve your concern? If you're talking about the proposal for the proposal to contract our services out, yes, they would be on mountain. We do provide housing. We currently provide a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit with 4 beds in it. And we also, in our employee housing currently, and we have fire quarters, which needs to be remodeled and is proposed as part of this in our capital, which was the previous answer to Christian, which currently can house 2. So we currently can house 6 firefighters on mountain. If we're contracted, how they get out, I think that answer, they would be on mountain. They generally, and I don't, Rick, do you know if they're running, what their schedule is? Are they running 96 or their
Not
shifts?
sure. I think it's 96-48.
Yeah. So 4 on 3 off, I guess then. So we would have people rotating, and if they were not able to get off, obviously they'd be here. So, but that would be something we'd have to negotiate with AFPD, because I'm sure they have union requirements with their firefighters. If you're reaching for the sky on the budget, since you cannot change it but spend less, does the KMPUD pocket the excess? No, we would change the assessment if costs were reduced, and anything that was surplus would go into the operational budget for the next year, which would also reduce the cost. Is it all Alpine County voters or only Kirkwood residents voting? I think I answered that. It's anyone who's registered to vote in the Kirkwood Special District service area. Seems that Vail was not informed of this proposal in advance. Clearly, I think I already addressed that. Clearly, they were. Is there a question in here? I'm looking. Yeah, I think that's everything on that one. Then Larry Parker, any expected, and I think this also goes to Greg's comment, any expected benefits to homeowners beyond shorter time response time insurance premiums? That would depend on our ISO rating. I don't know that our ISO rating would change in the better, because I think that relies on a ladder truck, if I'm not mistaken, Rick. That's one of the requirements, along with a paid fire department But certainly our ISO rating could go down given the current situation of KVFD immediately. Another one from Regina. Will these folks be doing tree underbrush removal? No, that's currently assigned to our solid waste department, and they do that in the summertime. What is the total head count of paid staff to cover 24/7, 365? It's basically two on the mountain, whether that's a firefighter or engineer, a supervision from a battalion chief, whether that's remote or on mountain is yet to be determined. And then obviously because they're running long shifts, I think they counted three sets of those to cover all the shifts, since somebody obviously can't work 24/7. That's yep, and just repeating what he said already. Okay. Was increasing the, yes, this is from Howard, increasing the current assessment considered. Yes, it was, but it wasn't felt. The board did not believe it was fair to put the entire burden on only parcels that had buildings on them. And I think that takes care of everything.
Okay. Let me see the other questions that were submitted in advance. One is, should vacant lots be included? Don't they present some level of service needed? So is there any comment on vacant lots?
No, they weren't included. When they do build, they would be added, and thereby reducing the assessment the more they get built. So no, vacant lots are not included because they aren't receiving any benefit, and this is a benefit received assessment.
Okay. I think we have covered a lot of the questions that were asked. Yeah.
Yeah, Bob, I think one important one, and I answered it in the chat or in the Q&A, but one that did come up is what about the existing assessment? And currently the way the ordinance is written is that would be eliminated. Or the resolutions are written as that the current assessment of the so many cents per square foot of combustible space would be eliminated as part of this proposal as written.
Right. Okay. With that, then I see no other people requesting with their hands up. So is there a, yeah, John?
Oh, I guess if we've exhausted public comment, then
hang on. There's one more just.
Yeah, sorry. One just came into the chat.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't answer this. Christian did ask this before, and that's my fault for not answering. Yes, the summary of costs were included in the previous board packet. So if you go to our website, kmpud.com, you can look at the board packets, and the budgets associated with what we're discussing were in there. Yes.
Okay, so I believe there's one person. No, I guess there isn't. Okay, good. So that is all the hands raised. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess if we've exhausted all the public comment, then I'd present a motion to end the public comment section of this meeting. And
okay,
move forward.
I'll second that motion. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Peter, would you do the roll call?
Certainly. Epstein?
Aye.
Schroeder?
Aye.
Mindertranda, absent. Perot? Bertrand, are you there?
Yes or no?
Yes, I needed to unmute. I don't believe this is a proper format for this kind of thing, so I'm going to abstain on closing that open session because I think we should do this kind of meeting in person so people can talk and discuss, and instead of restraining the feedback from the community. So I think this is not the appropriate process. So, but please go ahead.
So that was an aye?
No, that was an abstain.
Oh, an abstain, okay. And I vote, Dornbrook votes aye. So it's
okay.
3 to 1 to 1.
To 0.
Or what? Yes, I keep saying
okay.
That.
That's all right. That's all right. Okay, so that closes the public comment session. Let me now open it up to the board, and the issue before us is the creation of the Community Facilities District as described. So let me see who would like to start. John, you've spent the most time working with this. You want to offer your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult situation, like many things in Kirkwood. We've got a small community that's in a remote location with extreme weather. There aren't a lot of options for service providers or alternatives. I think there have been a lot of efforts to try to get more resources from the counties that haven't been successful in the past. So it is what appears to be a expensive proposal. I guess what haunts me is that we could have a medical emergency that could end up being a catastrophe, or a fire that ends up being a catastrophe that causes injury, and that we didn't take action to do something about that. Coming up with a perfect solution is probably impossible. So this is a viable solution. Many of the suggestions that have been made about increasing the volunteer component of this, both for building community and reducing cost, can still be addressed with the CFD. And in fact, it might be a big motivator to catalyze that. Meaning, we've got a date coming up where we have to provide the actual tax amount for next year. I think that comes up on August 10th. So that's a big motivator between now and August 10th to see, for example, how we might be able to work better with Vail to come up with a more cost-effective solution, and maybe a solution that builds more community. And then even if we don't do something by August 10th, on an annual basis, we can adjust what this model is and what the actual tax is. So, so I think it could provide a benefit with regards to, it does give us the resources to provide support and response to avoid medical or fire catastrophes, but it also keeps the door completely open for alternative solutions that could build more community involvement, more involvement with Vail, and also reduce cost. So it doesn't preclude that. So I think that, that's why I'm in favor of moving forward with this, but it's really moving forward to put it in front of the voters and have them decide if this is an initiative they want to move forward with. So this isn't something the board can decide on. All we can do is place it out there in the public, and then the public can speak with their votes.
I'd like to come. Are you done, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to comment, and actually I agree with a few points that you made, and I have some concern also I'd like to express. I'm going to start with the last one, with the method of using registered voters. So this is a difficult one because this is not the people that may decide this election may actually not even be coming very often in the valley. So I do have a problem that we put that in the hand of registered voters, knowing that some people are registered voters and come just a few weekends a year, and they don't really care, and they are not even owner either. They may be family related or things like that. So I think it's really, there is a mismatch between the people that are going to be impacted by that, and certainly for Vail, that's a fair argument, and the people who are actually going to decide that thing. So back to the initial comment of having the CFD being a catalyzer, I can see the point. I'm concerned actually that we actually are not playing hardball enough with the counties. We need, I know we've tried and they say no, not interested, but maybe we should tell them that if they are not improving our tax or funding for this kind of service, we could incorporate and get all our local taxes would go straight to Kirkwood instead of staying with the counties. So we have some leverage there. And if we already start to do a CFD, we actually show our hands and they are not going to believe us. So I think the whole process is too rush. There is a problem. We need to find solution, but we are really shooting for the moon, like Rick said here. And this is an excessive proposal. And I'm looking for middle ground solution, which involve the community, which involve VEL. VEL has been aware that they need to step up to the plate in a better fashion than they do currently. So that's where I am, and that's why I think the CFD is premature. We may get there, but I think at this stage, I think it's premature. We still need to explore what our options are with a better community exchanges and better relation and discussion with the VEL resort, which obviously has a major part to play here. Then the next thing I'd like to say is on the specific implementation based on parking space. This is full of unfairness. The first one is we lose basically the square footage, combustible area as a proxy, which I understand doesn't apply because VEL would not pay enough for this effort, but it is actually totally unfair to ask someone with a very small cabin of less than 1,000 square feet to pay the same thing that some cabin 5,000-6,000 square feet pay. And so really the implementation, in my opinion, is faulty. There is a fault in that implementation. It's not a critique in itself, it's a complex topic, so it's difficult to find the right balance in the solution. And this was basically concocted by a few people at KMD. I was not involved at all, actually. I've not even seen the RMA. I don't think it was ever in the packet. If it was, I missed it. I would love to see the RMA, the rate and method apportionment. So you see how you came up with that magic number of $530 per parcel, per parking space. So I could go on, but basically, I think the CFD might be a solution, but it's premature. We should work with the community, work with VEL, and put more pressure on the counties and see where we can get. And if it all fail, we could go to the CFD. As far as the proposal for the vote, the proposal is really defective. There is major issue of unfairness in the system, including to VEL, actually. Like Matt explained, how this parking space is a moving target. Which brings another question: is this can change over time, so that $513 may not be adequate in the future because of this thing. So the whole thing needs more thinking, and I really recommend that we put a pause, but click the pause button here, involve the community. There is a problem, need to be addressed. I think even for this summer, we could actually get much more volunteers with, Rick says it's an open, you always have a lot of advertising for volunteers. I never heard one, actually, since I'm in Kirkwood. So actually, I'm corrected. I heard one maybe 10 or 15 years ago. There was a call for volunteers. But lately, I have not heard anything about that problem. And it was after the Calder fire, we had a fairly decent group of firefighters. It looks like now we have a problem, which I don't think is actually specific to Kirkwood. If you look nationwide, there is actually some kind of firefighter availability crisis going on. So I think it's an overreaction the way it is proposed now. There is a problem. Let's fix it. involve the community, and that's my position.
Peter, do you want to comment?
Well, yesterday morning I was channel surfing about 8:30, and I stumbled on a show called Matter of Facts. It's narrated by Soledad O'Brien. And guess what they were talking about? A nationwide shortage of firefighters and volunteers in particular. There's 30%, they did a survey of counties across the country, and there's a 30% shortage of firefighters right now. So this isn't a problem that's going to go away quickly. It's not a problem that's just in Kirkwood. This is happening everywhere. And one of the solutions in terms of recruiting volunteers is they're going to high schools and approaching kids that can't get into college, or can't afford to get into college, or don't want to go to college, and offering them apprenticeships directly out of high school as a solution to this problem. I don't know if that's going to work, but my feeling is we're running out of options. We're running out of time. The sooner we act, the better. So I support the proposal to go ahead at this time with election.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So let me offer my comments on this. So first off, I don't think, in terms of negotiating with the counties, we don't have any additional leverage, and the threat to create a city or the rest of that is it's very expensive. We would end up with a lot of additional costs. So I don't think that actually gets us there. And right now, I think we are asking a limited number of people to take the stress of just the risk of a failure that we're all going to regret. And I'm honored to be a member of this board. I'm honored to be, elected. I don't want to be here when a fire can't be contained, when somebody could be saved and they're not. I don't want to live with that. And right now we are asking too much and we're taking too many risks. Now, I also would say that I do not know the answer to how much we can afford, or even that, how fast it could be developed. If we went to Amador and they wanted to work with us, and we don't know that for sure, they don't have a staff waiting to relocate. It's going to take quite a while to develop that. I think one of the things this has accomplished, this whole process, is it's raised awareness. And I'm really appreciative of that. I'm appreciative of people's comments. And I want to be able to respond to that awareness by actually working towards some solutions, not studying the problem for another year. And that's what concerns me the most, is an additional study. I don't think it's going to lead anywhere. Whereas given the pressure of trying to produce some results and working together, we don't have to spend the money. We're only going to spend it when we know what it takes and how it can be done, how it can be developed. So passing this to the voters, I believe, is the way of giving the community a chance to decide, do they want a minimal support that may or may not be available? It depends on the time. Or do they want to figure out a way of saying, what's the best support we could get that we can afford? Then this gives them the decision to do that. I regret the fact that everybody doesn't vote, but I can't change the laws of the state of California. They say that a tax is decided, a special tax is decided by 2/3 of the votes of the eligible voters. So that we can't get, that we can't change. And as Eric reminds me, we can't drive to be a city. So I retract that misinformation. And the CFD law requires that it presented to registered voters. So that may not be optimal. We may wish we could do something else, but that is not within our ability to make the decision. So I think the advantage of putting it to the voters is it's making two decisions. One, it's saying that we are going to change the tax structure, so it includes more than just things that are represented by the structures. I think after looking at a lot of different options, I think what's come up with is reasonable. I would just like to keep the price down. So I agree with everything that's said there, but we won't know that until we know that we can negotiate from a position of strength, that we have the ability to raise money. We don't want to raise more, but we have to do more than what we're currently doing. So taking this to the voters allows a period of time for more debate to go on, for more community things. If the majority of the community says no, that's their decision, but they've had a chance to do it. So denying them that and going on to a new study, I think is unfair to the current fire department. And I think it's very dangerous. So that's why I support moving forward with the creation of it. Are there other board member staff comments?
Well, just a couple notes I've taken, just a couple of things. There was some discussion earlier, and again, I missed it. I apologize for not responding earlier about requiring staff to live on mountain. I understand that was done in the olden days. That is currently no longer allowed under California labor law. So that's even been removed from our employee handbook. So we can't require people to live on mountain. So that was one thing. The other was, I think, in response to Carolyn, you mentioned something about removing the word prevention. So that would be a question for the board. Do you want to remove the word prevention from the resolution and the exhibits? So that would be something for the board to discuss. And finally, to Bertrand, the rate and method of apportionment was included in the last board packet, and it's included in this board packet. So had you read it, you would have seen it.
I did read it. Actually, I didn't see how you come up with the $530 number. I check all my packet. So please show it to me. You have the floor.
Rate and method of apportionment, page 39.
It's also on slide 12.
Yeah. So it's included.
So the 530.
It's also just math, right? You take the maximum number of the total tax and divide it by the number of spaces, and you end up with the apportionment per space. I mean, roughly 1.9 divided by 3,800. Those are not the exact numbers, but you get to around 500 per space.
Okay, now the other question raised on that is, I assume before this actually we get submitted, as we'd reconcile the actual counting of the parking spaces. Correct, Eric?
Yes, if there were any, yes, but again, this is the maximum. So if there were any changes, that it would change, but we couldn't go above 513 if anything did change, though.
No, I understand that, but I just mean on slide, I think it was 10. The numbers, sorry, slide 11, that we would work with Vail to make sure those numbers are correct. And if there's any, just the initial assessment of parking spaces, we would re-review with Vail to make sure they're accurate.
Yeah, we would definitely do that. If you look at their current submission, if you look at their max days in their 21-22 submission, they have a total, if you count their maxes up, it's 2,024 parking spaces. And we came up with 2,060. Some of the parking they have that isn't included in that is for some of their employee housing that has dedicated spaces, such as the one here on Loop Road, plus the new 65 Loop Road parking was not included in their 21-22 count, nor the parking at their maintenance shop. So
you would resolve all of that before before going. Okay,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to answer, please. Yeah, so I did effectively miss the name of that appendix, but I'm still. You come up with a parking number, but can you show me where is the cost? Define the 1.9 million in that document?
The cost was defined when the board took up which model we wanted to proceed with, and all those numbers were in there.
Yeah, so I would expect this to have been included in the current packet because this is an important things. So you cannot expect people to chase. That's 2 or 3 packets ago. So I really think that calculation should have been included.
That's why we put it in the slide presentation.
Yeah.
So it was right there for everybody to see.
There was one item I thought might be worth talking about too, which was we're proposing dropping the existing fee based on square footage of structures. And I have to be honest, I've thought about that quite a bit myself as far as whether we should keep that and not remove that. And that would reduce some of the amount from the 1.9.
And I agree.
And it might, it might be a way for us to revisit the future if we wanted to change that amount. I don't think we know exactly what the method would be to change the amount. It hasn't been adjusted for many, many years. But leaving it in there as a mechanism might give us
100% agree with you. I think we should right away at the next board meeting revise that number upward to be more realistic and generate more fund for the thing and adjust accordingly the RMA.
So kind of a simple change for this vote would be just to take that part out, not remove that, and then we could revisit that in a future board meeting like you suggest.
Or if we decide to get rid of it, we could make the amount 0.
And one thing that it does also keep some proportionality with the size of the structure, which I think is an important fairness parameter.
Yeah, it does give us a mechanism to work on.
So I'm totally in support of that. Would be to not only keep it, but appraise it significantly. It would start raising money for the fire department immediately, and it would reduce the burden on the parking space as well.
Just to be clear, so you guys are going down a path that we can't go down. So when that was originally done by ordinance, that was before Proposition 218 was passed by the California voters. To do a new special assessment, to redo that will require a new assessment engineering study, and we require a vote of the assessed parcels. It would be a per parcel vote, so it wouldn't be immediate. As was stated, it would take a study and some time, and then a vote and a few public hearings to boot.
Yeah, and you explained that to me before, and I understand it's not very easy, but I think if we just didn't remove it, we could take time to revisit it in the future and see if a change is feasible.
Yeah, as a first step, we don't have to remove it. I would start with that and see what we can do if it's more involved to actually be able to increase that square footage cost. I'm surprised because it should be automatic, in my opinion, that based on similar to what we have here in this proposal of 2 to 6%, depending on CPI. And certainly, I would definitively explore these avenues instead of dropping it.
Okay, are we ready for a motion on the floor?
Well, yeah, I'd make a motion to approve this with the change to not remove the existing fee based on structures.
What about the word prevention? That was the other thing you guys haven't discussed yet that was mentioned, unless there's no stomach for it, which is great. It's fine. Bob said to Carolyn that we would. When I heard Carolyn, I heard her describe what I thought was one of our description documents, not the actual text. Yeah.
Of things. I'm reluctant to ask, given the time frame, to go into the text. I think we could have a note that just says our intention behind prevention is reduced fire load, things of that sort. I think we could clarify what we're willing to do as prevention. And
we're going to modify this document anyway if you're going to get rid of 8. So just if we're going to do it, we could do it now. It's a low lift.
All right. All right. If it's a low lift and it improves clarity.
Yeah.
That's okay. I didn't interpret it that way, but I could see why somebody would.
Yeah. So right. So if we are going to eliminate 8 and not terminate the fire suppression assessment, then dealing with the word prevention is not hard.
Okay.
But that's, again, it's the board's discretion whether they would like to do that or not.
All right, John, do you want to add that to your?
Yeah, do we want to take out the word prevention, or do we want to clarify the meaning?
Rick, do you have an easy word to add in?
Honestly, I think prevention is a fairly generic term used in the fire service. It doesn't hold us to doing inspections. In fact, it might be a revenue source if we start doing inspections for fee. So my vote would be just to leave it as is and not get hung up with the language so much.
Okay, well, I'm strongly influenced by your opinion since it's informed.
Yeah.
Should we define prevention somewhere at the beginning?
I think that'd be much more difficult because we need to define any other terms.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should keep it simple, and as we put together working documents,
Okay.
add clarity, if that's okay with you.
Can I make it?
Go ahead, Peter.
I think removing the idea that we're going to eliminate the old assessment is going to affect the passage of this in a negative way, because I think if you're looking at this increased fee in addition to the assessment, I think that's going to lose some votes.
Yeah,
Well-
no, I wanted to offset. I'd like to see the cost of this parcel tax be reduced by the amount raised by the fee.
Yeah, it's about 67,000 a year, I think. Is that right, Eric?
That's what I meant by that, Peter, not to add an
It's-
additional 60,000.
Like 64.8, Bob.
64.
It means you're going to be paying the full rate. I mean, the idea that you're going to remove that kind of offsets the new increase. I mean,
Yeah, we would reduce it by that amount.
We would reduce the other amount by the suppression fee. That's what was my intent of.
That's what I understood too.
Peter, does that work for you? We would just reduce the total amount that we need from the new fee by the amount of the old fee. So there's no net change.
okay. But you have to convey that to the voter.
Yeah, that's what I meant, but
Yeah.
we should make that clear. Yeah.
Okay, so is there a motion on the floor then?
Yeah, the motion is to pass this resolution, striking item 8 that
Right.
that discontinues the suppression fee, but use that fee to offset the cost of the tax assessment.
Okay. I will second the motion. Is there further discussion? Okay, and not hearing any. Peter, will you do the roll call?
Certainly. Epstein,
Yes.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Sharonda absent, Perot,
I still think it's premature to go through the CFD, but I appreciate the change in removing section 8, and I'm still going to vote no at that stage.
okay, that's a no. Dornbrook, aye. So the
John,
motion-
just for clarification on your motion, the intent of your motion was to offset the 1.9 million with the 64,000, correct?
Correct.
That's how the motion wasn't quite clear, but now that I have clarity, then I think we're fine.
Yep, that's what I meant.
Does that work for you, Dave? Sorry, our bond counsel is concerned about the motion.
Yeah, we will put into the resolution, take out 8 or modify the wording of 8, saying that the actual levy of the special tax will reflect amounts collected under the assessment. just so you understand, the amount set forth in the rating method is a maximum tax, so you can always levy less than that. So the theory would be that you're saying you're going to levy less than that because you're going to account for the assessment. So the wording would be to that effect.
Correct.
Okay. We will change it accordingly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's now move on to 9B, Resolution 23-04. And this calls for putting this to the voters. Are you getting to this?
Yes, I'm getting there. Sorry, Bob. I'm scrolling.
Okay.
Yes.
I can read it that right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So do you want to describe what's in this document?
Sure.
Briefly. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, quickly, this has been reviewed by Alpine County as well as our bond council and district council as well. And so the dates in here were provided by Alpine County. We appreciate Taylor getting that to us in such a timely fashion. But it includes the ballot measure itself as well. And basically this is what we will send to Alpine County and that they will use to proceed with the special election.
Okay, I think it'd be appropriate to just read what the ballot measure says.
Sure, the ballot measure, sure. Up on the screen here. Shall the measure enabling the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District to provide fire protection, prevention, and suppression services, including medical services, by replacing a 1997 fire suppression assessment, which we will have to change that, Dave.
Right.
With a maximum of annual special tax levy of $513 per parking space in fiscal year 2023-24, increasing annually thereafter, continuing in perpetuity, annually generating approximately $1.9 million initially, and authorizing initial appropriations of $6 million be adopted. And then the answer is yes or no.
Can you explain what it means, the initial appropriations of $6 million? That's not in any one year, right? That's
no. So Dave, I think this is,
Dave, can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a technical thing. It's called the GAN limit. It was
okay.
Yeah, brought in by the voters. It's intentionally set high. It is allowed to escalate based on population and CPI. So we just set it at an amount that will cover the 2% or the CPI on the 513.
Okay. Thanks.
And
so
forward, I think, how many years do we look forward on that? I think 30 years or something, Dave, when we came to the 6 million number is what we used.
If Andrea's on, she may be able to answer. They calculated it and it's quite higher than what they calculated. I think it was 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't expect the average voter to understand what that means. Is this the language we have to use?
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, under the GAN rules, it has to be voted on.
Right, but the wording has to be exactly this, as opposed to saying never to exceed 6 million in a future calendar year, which is what it actually says.
No, it is allowed to increase. So what they vote on is the initial.
Right, but it can never exceed 6 million.
No, that's not correct.
Okay, so please help me understand what it means.
Yeah, under the GAN rules, it is allowed to increase, and it's based on a formula of CPI and population. So it's initially set at 6 million, and it can increase every year based on that methodology. It's set high because if it doesn't increase for some reason, then it would need to increase because it is set high, because your special tax can increase every year.
Right. But I'll try my question one more time.
Okay.
Is there any way to have the language in the ballot measure be easier to understand what's implied by it?
No, I mean, it's a complicated concept. We could put, GAN limit in parentheses because some people are familiar with that. It was constitutional amendment that was voted on. But to explain it, this measure wording has to be 75 words or less.
Okay.
So to give it any more detail, we just couldn't do it in the amount of words that are required.
So it could say, and authorizing a GAN limit of 6 million?
Yeah,
That, at least then you'd have to look up what a GAN limit is to know what it is.
yeah, that's good. They can Google that or whatnot. It would probably say a GAN limit appropriation. Yeah.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And then obviously it needs to, the text needs to change. There's no longer replacing.
Yeah, I already eliminated that. We'll use the word authorizing.
Okay.
So we'll say by authorizing a maximum annual special tax levy of 513.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Good.
Okay. I think the other thing that's appropriate to explain is if we approve this, then the county will accept arguments for and against this that can be included as part of, that will be included with the ballot measure when the ballot is sent out.
That is correct. And the timing on that was provided by the Alpine County Clerk, Teola, and it is included here. So when they have to be provided by, which is April 24th at 5 p.m. And then there is a time for a rebuttal, which is May 5th.
May
at
5th.
5 p.m.
So I just want to let people attending know that if you want to participate in comments for or against this, that there are deadlines for that, but that there is a process for doing that that's managed by the county, not by KMPUD. We are, our job at this point is to put it out there, but not to advocate as members, as the KMPUD. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, is there any discussion on this topic? I'm not hearing any. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 23-4 as amended?
Yes, motion to adopt 2302-4 as amended.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, I'll second the motion. Is there any discussion? Okay, not hearing any. Call for a vote.
Just, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'll lock myself out. Give me 1 second.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Give me 1 second. Okay, so my understanding is that 513 number is going to be adjusted, correct? Based on dividing, or is that going to stay at 1.9 million divided by the parking space? And also the other concern I have is there is a discussion, this is going to be had between VEL and KMPUD on this parking space number, which actually would change how we divide 1.9 million, and that would impact the 513. So I think is that what you are proposing here is actually undefined for the amount, correct or not?
This is strictly to do with putting us to the vote. You're a topic and a vote too late. This is just to send it to the Alpine County to proceed with the vote. Calling
No,
for
but
an
on the measure you are mentioning 513.
Right, that's the maximum that we can do under this, correct?
Okay.
Did that clarify?
Somewhat. Yeah.
Well, the number,
I think there is a problem in the whole thing, because if after discussion the number of parking spaces is significantly different, the 513 is not going to be sufficient to cover the 1.9.
That may be true. Yes, that may be true, but the max is 513 is the way we're passing it now. But we do adjust parking spaces annually, which is permitted. Right, Dave, that we adjust. So if a house built, we would add parking spaces in a subsequent year when we go through and analyze it and provide that to the consultant that's handling the CFD annually, correct?
Correct, yeah. And again, this is 513 is a maximum, so you can always levy less than the maximum. And if for some reason you lost parking spaces and you would like to levy more than 513, you can't do that.
Right.
That's correct.
Right.
So yeah. So we have two criteria here that are limiting, which is 513 and 1.9 million. And we'll see where we have fall.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess I don't anticipate a huge change in the parking space numbers. I mean, there's a lot of work spent collecting that data. So there could be some adjustments. They are going to be adjusted on an annual basis, but I don't see it being material.
I disagree. I think it could become material, but
okay.
Yeah.
So just
you think 1,000 parking spaces are going to appear or disappear?
Well, actually, if you read carefully what Matt Jones said in his email, yes, they may actually change. They may change how they count parking. Yes, absolutely, and they would have a financial incentive to do it.
Well, we can explain how the math is actually going to work, and the math will never achieve 513. We know that, so we're safe by using that number.
Yeah,
we can't know what the number is right at this moment until we clarify the things you've mentioned. So using that number is consistent with all the other documents, and we know it's a number that we will never use. It's higher than the maximum.
I think you really need to make that clear to the voters, because when they see a number 513, that's what they're going to budget for.
It's really kind of key to the whole discussion. This is a maximum tax rate, and the issue with it is if we go too low, if you say, hey, let's make it $300 a parking space, then we're going to be in trouble, and we'd have to go through this whole process over again to increase that amount. We can always charge less. We will charge less, but it's kind of the way this is set up. This is a max tax rate, and we do need to communicate that clearly. But that's kind of the fact. It's a lot of overhead to increase this in the future, and it's no overhead at all to come in below the 513.
So for the purpose of Resolution 2304, keeping the 513, it's a safe number. It's higher than we're going to need, and at least it's consistent with all the prior documentation we've sent out. So I'd be inclined to leave it, knowing that it's actually a lower number.
Do you have any idea how much lower?
Well, if I did the math right, if you take 1.9 million and subtract 64,000 from it, and then divide it by the 3,408 parking spaces.
Still 513.
It's still 513?
If you're rounding.
Oh, well, I don't want to do math in front of a live audience. Let's
maybe just focus on calling the election.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, the change being the line replacing a fire suppression assessment. Okay, is there further?
And adding the language about the GAN.
Right.
And the GAN
proposition.
Change. Right.
Which was
and you get a few
the words balance. The words balance. So if we're right at 75, we actually gain one word. So hopefully we should still be at 75, Dave.
Well, I trust Dave to be able to do that. So our intent is to drop the fire assessment comment and to clarify that it's a GAN limit.
Got it.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, then let's call for a vote.
Epstein?
Aye.
Schroeder?
Aye.
Minaturanda absent. Perot,
No.
Dornberg, aye.
Okay, that's items 9A and B. We're now ready for item 9C.
Can we have a 5-minute break?
Sure.
And
All right, so I have
Dave and Andrea,
4:30.
If you would like to go, I think we're done with your component for the meeting. So thank you for your
Yeah, thank you,
assistance and
David.
being present and being ready to answer questions. We appreciate both of you. Although Andrea did get off a little bit easier than Dave.
I'm here listening, and I had the answer on it was 39 years for the 6 million.
Okay, great. All right. By my clock, it's 4:34. So we're going to take a 6-minute break. Well, we'll start promptly at 4:40.
Okay.
To account for any variation in seconds.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay. So let's continue now with 9C, statement of support by the board. Eric, can you walk us through this?
Sure. So there was a court case called the Vargas case in 2009 that really limited what public entities could or could not do relative to ballot measures. But it does allow the board to make a statement of support for a ballot measure, whether it's ours or something else. The board is allowed to do that. So although we passed the 2 resolutions, ostensibly those just simply put it before the voters, and this doesn't necessarily imply support, it just put it before the voters. So the recommendation of district council and staff is that the board approve the following statement in support for the CFD, which is this: consistent with section 7 of the Board of Directors manual, the board as a body resolves that the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District Board of Directors hereby officially supports the creation and passage of Community Facilities District number 23-1 fire services, consistent with the passage of resolutions 2303 and 2304. And so that's the recommendation, and then that the board directs staff and consultants to provide objective factual information about the impacts of the measure if passed or defeated, subject to limitations provided in Vargas.
Okay, are there any questions about this or comments?
I have a technical question. So I did vote no for this resolution. Can I vote no on this? I mean, I as a board member, I am bound by the vote that the board is taking. So what's the flexibility here, technically?
I mean, you can vote any way you want, but the board manual says that you support the board decisions even when you lose a vote.
That's a technical decision ask that I had. I do have a problem. I mean, I'm going to abstain, basically. Yeah, that's what I can do. Okay.
Okay, are there other questions about the intent of this or other questions? And if not, does someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, motion to approve agenda item 9C.
Okay, is there a second? Peter, you haven't seconded all day, but.
Oh, I approved the minutes.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's right. I totally forgot that. All right, I will second the motion.
All right, Epstein.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Minaturanda absent. Perot.
Abstain.
Norbert, aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and I do want to express my appreciation to the many members of the community who both sent in letters and comments and ideas and participated in the public hearing. We will work really hard to make this all come together. All right, let's move on to item 9D, finances.
Hello.
Hello.
There we
Yep.
So as asked previously, built the overview and budget variances, which kind of just goes over, especially year-to-date numbers of whether an item is under budget or over budget. So the general questions that are normally asked are in the front, but I really just want to kind of look into the income statements, especially that were attached, and just talk about those. So the overall year-to-date income statement that includes all funds is actually under budget by $178,000. So that's great. The fire department, though, is a negative of 213, which would mean it would be over budget by 213,000 year to date.
Tommy, if you say income,
up. Sorry, Bob.
I'm sorry, Tommy. If you
Yes.
say income is under budget, that means it's below plan or above plan?
It means that we have more money coming in than expenses. So we are above.
Okay.
Under
Right,
budget means
thank you.
we're doing good, over budget is bad.
Correct.
Okay. I will use that terminology.
Thank you for that point of clarification, though, Bob.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
All right.
Just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page with everything.
Okay.
So for the water fund, we are under budget by 104,000. And just kind of going through all these, and this is going to just be an overview. Obviously, anyone can have questions on any of these further, but the wastewater is under budget by 190,000. It's the electric fund that is over budget by 309,000. But shell costs are going down. Shell costs actually were at 11.8 cents per kilowatt hour in February, which is great. And like we said, in December, we were up to 31 cents. So the number's coming back down, which is fantastic. Snow removal is currently under budget by 22,000, but as we know, it's been a lot of expenses in March. So we'll keep you posted on that. Propane fund is under budget by 21,000, and the solid waste is actually under budget by 13,000, but February labor costs were high, which is removing snow, especially from the snow pads and from garbage areas kind of throughout the valley. But any nitty-gritty questions that anyone has?
Let me unmute first. Okay. I do have another question / comment. So if I look page 73, we are showing the cost of electricity for the year was double what we were anticipating, a little over $1 million. Cost of goods sold, a little over $1 million versus 511K. My question is, so I understand it's because electricity was more expensive than we anticipated. And yeah, now my question is, how much of a concern it is knowing that we have a fixed rate, and what are the mechanisms if we need to adjust for that?
The mechanism would be another rate study and or a 218 or a quasi 218 process like we did for the last rate study.
So we don't have a similar thing for propane where we have a cost of propane adjustment thing. Is that something would be illegal because this is a regulated utilities, or is it because we have not scheduled something like that?
Let me comment on that a little bit because I was part of that initial decision.
Yes.
There are certain targets we have to meet for our loan. And rather than having to move the rates around to do that, we allocate a certain amount of property tax as a buffer for overage in costs to try to cover that. And that's worked quite well for the last 10 years.
Mhm.
But we really got nailed in December and January with a factor of 10 increase in wholesale prices.
Yeah.
But the normal way we have covered as historically covered things. So that's where we are.
So
And the next time we do a rate study, we could consider whether we want additional flexibility.
So in our current situation, so we are 300 only, not 500 over. I'm sorry, budget on electricity for the year to date. So that means we would need 300 more K from the tax allocation, and do we have it, or how is that impacting other things? Because we are committed to it through the Ross loan, no?
Yeah, we are
impacting our tier ratios and our property tax allocation.
Say it again.
It's impacting our tier ratios and therefore the required property tax allocation.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we've requested a waiver from two, I believe, Tommy, two of the property tax or two of the tier ratio requirements. We'll see if they approve it. If they do approve it, I'm going to get these numbers backwards. It's going to be 435. If they don't approve it, it's going to be 550. Is that right?
425 if they don't, or if they do, 550 if they don't.
Okay, so you only anticipate 125K extra tax needed to cover the difference.
Yes.
And why is that? Because we are 300 under. So I'm just curious about it.
Because that's what our loan covenants require.
Okay. It's basically the tier ratio that basically
it's the
commands
tier
that.
ratio and the O tier ratio.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had, and you'll recall, we got a waiver the last few years from those because of COVID. Those waivers are long gone. They ended. So we have to meet them. Unless, unless you request a waiver, which we are going to request a waiver on two of them, but we'll see if they approve it or not.
Yes, I mean, we do have, it was an exceptional increase in rate. So we do have some justification for asking that waiver. So hopefully they'll give it to us.
And that's what I'll be referencing,
we'll
especially.
Yeah.
It's also a good reminder of why we need to have property tax available.
Right.
That these situations do come up, and we need to be able to be meet those tier ratios.
Right. Okay. Tommy, get back to the financials. Are there what else do you want to cover
from the board?
Okay. All right. Good. Then this is through February.
This is February.
Right. Anything
March
else?
we'll be doing. Hopefully, we'll finish billing tomorrow or the day after, and so then
good.
we can.
Looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to then item E, performance reporting.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Just highlight anything you think is of particular interest given the lateness of the hour.
Absolutely. So as with financials, this is just through February because of the timing of the meeting. I think the most notable things in performance reporting are the unidentified system loss being negative in water. In February, we had a lot of trouble getting to our wells. So we relied as much as possible on tankage gallons that we had in the tank, which affected our production numbers. You can see the same thing happened in December. So no cause for concern there, just something of note. And then the other thing, as I was putting this together, I noted was with the charts that I have after the performance reporting, you can really see that the temperatures in December, January, February, and March were low for this time of year. So we had, a lot of propane use, which was mitigated in part by our request to the community to conserve propane, but definitely a big winter for us.
Eric, do you want to move ahead to those slides? Keep going. So I think that's what you're referring to, right?
Exactly. That's just a note as I was making those. Other than that, a pretty normal month. And like Tommy said, next month we should have both March and April for you.
Yeah, and those low temperatures are the reason why the snowpack is so high on the roof.
They are.
Okay.
So,
Good.
so Brandy, I would think, you know, like it might be 50 degrees up here in a week. So if we have a quick change to warm weather, it's gonna be a lot of runoff. You would expect that to impact wastewater treatment plant, where we pick up some rainwater, or I should say snow melt. Is that correct?
Yes, in years past, a heavy amount of snow melt would increase dramatically our I&I, which is just water coming into the system through cracks or broken manhole rings. We do know of a few issues that are out there. Damages from the winter, from snow removal impacts to manholes and things like that. But we've also done some mitigation over the past few years. So we'll just have to watch closely and see not only what I&I does for us, but also if we get any flooding in our infrastructure, like the wastewater treatment plant or the East Lift itself.
Yeah. So I think we probably could expect to see worse numbers than normal over the next few months, right?
Yes, typically typically this is our highest amount, and with snowpack like this, we should expect to see higher numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else, Brandy?
Not on performance reporting.
Okay, great. Then we'll move on to the propane meter shed update. And can I just say before you get started, I went around, did a lot of photographs of my own house and others, and I am so much more comfortable with the fact that this really helped us in a severe winter like this. I had no idea how much snow could accumulate and what it might be able to do. So I appreciate the efforts that staff has done to get people to respond.
Absolutely. And, you know, a winter like this highlights our need to do this sort of thing. Tommy and John Campbell have both been doing an excellent job continuing on this mission. This information here, we haven't had any changes, no additional movement since the last board meeting. So this is where we sit. Our next compliance happens in May for a couple of residential meters, 2 high and 1 low, and then throughout the summer for additional ones. There's a lot coming up in June. So as the snow melts, our staff still has a lot of communication work to do with the customers that are still outstanding.
It is possible that there'll be still snow in June. I should say likely. So that could be a problem for people trying to get into compliance. So can we consider giving a 30-day or 60-day moratorium? Or
we could, but I would also note that they've had almost 2 years. So
I know.
You know, it's a bit of a straw man.
Yeah. As a general note, I think I don't know how much extra time propane staff has, but I am concerned about still incident, meaning explosions, that could happen in April with such a snow load. So is there a plan for staff to actually check meters for making sure that they are they can breathe?
No, most of these meters are under 20 feet of snow and we can't access them. So no, I'm not going to go have them shovel out 20 feet of snow.
No.
500 residences.
Yep, I understand. I'm just wondering, there are a few known high-risk situations that maybe should be checked. So that's basically my comment here.
Okay. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
Project updates. Eric, any changes you want to identify?
Yeah, as we talked about last time, I did move the hydrology study back as a lower priority, just because we simply aren't going to get to it at the time we planned. We did have our meeting with Stantec. We're still waiting on comments back from USDA. So we will have some design in this quarter, which we did not anticipate, which is basically responding to USDA's comments before we get the finals. We still anticipate bidding in spring as planned, but there's going to be some design occurring as well as bidding occurring in Q2. That was, I think, the only change, except for deleting Q1, which is over.
Right.
Can I ask a question on that? What's the propane tank and roof project? How big is it and what it is?
That's the project we've been discussing for some time. I think you've been at those board meetings, but that's the, do we do the additional propane tank and do we do the roofs over the tanks and vaporizers? That's that project.
So that's what I'm asking.
All we're doing now is the pre-design. That's all we're going to do is that first level of effort, and then we'll decide if we're going to proceed forward after that, as was discussed.
Okay, so you are speccing, if I can say that, what it would take to add a propane tank. Is that what it is?
That would be the project, to add a propane tank and add roofs over the tanks and vaporizers.
Yeah. Okay. So, but because the master plan is scheduled for Q2 and Q3, so I'm a bit confused that we already would be in bid and build in Q3 as well.
Yes, well, this was. I'm confused by your.
Let me just
not
add
remembering
in
what we voted on.
that was a board decision
Yeah.
to accelerate the propane tanks.
Right.
And what we're first doing is seeing whether we can even do that at all. So I think your question would be real well posed in June after we get the pre-design back to decide what we want to do.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And for the time being, these are just placeholders.
But yeah, the master plan was broken out separate from this. The board decided they wanted to accelerate the propane tanks and roof.
Right.
Separate from the master plan. That was the action and direction given by the board.
As I said, I was not aware there was a vote or motion on that had passed. So that's why I'm asking this question, trying to understand. Yeah. So it looks like we have not yet discussed and voted on that. And so for now, you are shooting for Q3 and Q4 to work on that.
Depending on what the pre-design, yes, the pre-design will be brought back by June, and then the board can decide if they want to keep going forward with the tanks and roof.
Okay, Eric, anything else you want to mention on this?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, great. All right, then general manager's report.
Well, Rick, I think Rick's still on. I'll definitely not steal his thunder about the excitement that we had at Whiskey Towers. I'll let him report on that. Let's see. Oh, we did finally get a contract with a consultant for the needs assessment. So he will return next week and sign that, and they will start on that. They'll get it done in about 3 to 4 months. So we will have the needs assessment done here this summer, which is good news. And I'm still waiting on the proposal for the propane master plan consultant. That's about all I have.
So I missed the tower thing. So can you explain a bit what happened?
Rick is going to talk about that.
Okay.
So you didn't miss anything. You're just waiting. You're anxious with anticipation, but Rick will get to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the GM report?
No.
Okay. Rick? Operations report.
A few things. One, snow removal equipment is slowly coming back into repair, which is nice. As you may or may not know, we sent 2 pieces of equipment out to be repaired in Sparks, Nevada, and both of those pieces of machine have come back. We've repaired since those 2, along with another one, and staff is slowly getting back to normal, even with the storms that have been hitting, seems like every week. However, just there is going to be a bit of a delay. The snowpack, due to the rain on snow on multiple events, has created essentially an iceberg out there. And so it's just taken a lot more time and effort for us to remove the snow in some areas, and also to widen the snow in some areas. And we've literally had to take backhoes and buckets to break up the snow and try to make in a condition that we could blow the snow and remove it. We're still challenged with storage. We're still challenged with trying to be everywhere at the same time, but I'm pleased that staff is actually doing a good job trying to keep up with it all. And then for fire department, as Eric alluded, there was an incident last a week ago Friday. We had a propane line that was on the exterior wall of the 7800 restaurant that broke due to extreme snow load. That leak, propane being heavier than air, actually the propane filled the basement as well as the first floor of the towers. Fire department was called at essentially 8 o'clock in the morning to turn and the district was called to turn the gas off, investigate the leak. The towers was actually condemned and closed for most of the day a week ago Saturday, so we could evacuate the propane, make the building safe. We allowed the occupants to return Saturday evening that was the 25th is what I'm talking about, to occupy the building without propane until we could assure that the leak was found and the repair was made on the line. I'm pleased to announce a week later, all homeowners have propane has been restored, and the restaurant has mitigated a few issues internally within the restaurant, but also the propane line for the restaurant was repaired and they were open last weekend. But a very scary moment, and just a good example why it's so important to pay attention to the propane meters as well as any lines associated with the meter on the customer side. And then finally, just a quick update. The first summer festival meeting met a couple weeks ago. And due to staffing levels and timing, it's going to be challenging for us to produce the same type of event that we've had in the years past. So we're working with Vail F&B team through the Epic Promise grant donation to slightly change the event this year. And the focus will be not for a beer and wine tasting, but more of a summer festival picnic barbecue where alcohol could be purchased at the event on site, and change this event from what it's been in years past to more of a craft fair and really the main community summer festival, main community event for everybody to get together, but also hopefully a good donation site for the fire department as well. So that's my operations report, unless there's any questions from the board.
Just an observation that this year that event will be happening about the same time people are receiving their ballots.
Oh, good.
Okay, any questions for Rick? Okay, let's move on to standing committee reports. Start with finance.
I don't think there's anything further to report. Eric, did I miss anything?
No, we're starting to work on budget. That's basically the next week. What we're gonna, Tommy and I are pounding that out, getting that ready for the finance committee.
Okay.
That's it.
Is there anything to report on planning? Since Doug
Doug
isn't here.
submitted his 2 reports, which are included in the board packet.
Right, so we can just read those. Okay, then Peter, operations and communications.
Nothing really new to a report.
Okay, and there was a personnel meeting, but there wasn't anything. I don't think there's anything significant to report out.
No, I think we're bringing that whole issue back in May.
Yeah, right. Okay. The temporary advisory committees, is there any? I don't think there's anything there. Okay, then our last item is a general discussion. If any board members want to ask questions or clarifications or bring something up for a subsequent meeting. Bertrand, I made your note in terms of energy pricing, also energy costs.
Yes, thank you. So I have one thing. So during when the valve stopped functioning and we basically had a loss of pressure in propane, so that resulted in a lot of work to actually be able to shut off some meter, and so for safety. And when people were not responding or were not contacted in time. So my question is, so the snow removal staff has been diverted from snow removal to working on propane safety. And my question is what kind of mechanisms there is in place between these two departments to account for this loss for snow removal and by moving people from snow removal to propane, knowing that each of these departments are supposed to stand on their own.
So first thing, no snow removal staff ended up being diverted at all. So that didn't happen. Second thing is
that's what was
hold
said.
on, let me finish, please. Thank you. Didn't interrupt you. The second thing is we fill out biweekly time cards and you charge your time where you worked. So if you worked in water, you charge it to water. If you worked in propane, you charge it to propane. If you worked in snow removal, you charge it to snow removal. So that's how we track it and that's how we bill out the hours.
Okay. Good. That was my question. I wanted to know. As far as no snow removal being diverted, my source is your communication to the community. So I didn't invent it.
Yes,
and if you
we thought we were going to, and we ended up not needing them.
Well, that was not correct at it. So that's why I asked this question.
Okay. Anything else? General discussion?
Yeah, I raised this question about the conflict of interest of having the general manager pocketing hiring what is called bonus, whatever it is.
It's a finder's fee.
Yeah, finder's fee. I think there is a serious conflict of interest there. I think that needs to be looked at and see how we can adjust that. To me, typically this kind of program are for employees, not the general manager.
I have a note of that in the wholesale energy, so I'll follow up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody else? Okay, well, this has been a tremendous board meeting. I thank everybody for their time, all the community members who participated. And we're going to adjourn now. The next board meeting is also a special board meeting. It's going to take place on Monday, May 1st at 2 p.m. due to schedule conflicts, if I remember correctly. Right. So, and also it's a chance to ski for the weekend and then attend it. So we'll see you all on May 1st. Thank you very much for your time.
All right.